Good morning and welcome to the City Club of Cleveland. I'm Stephanie Jansky, the Director of Programming, and it's my privilege today to introduce our speakers, James M. Free, Director of the NASA John H. Glenn Research Center, and Michael T. Good, NASA Astronaut. NASA and the City Club of Cleveland have a rich history. In 1970, John Glenn gave the first of his 12 speeches here, and in 1998 was the first recipient of the City Club of Cleveland Citadel of Free Speech Award, which recognizes and honors individuals who have made a significant contribution to the advancement, protection, and promotion of free speech. Colonel Robert Overmyer spoke in December 1982, and Dr. Guy Bluford, the first African-American to travel in space, followed in December 1983. It is fitting, then, that we're gathered here this morning to mark yet another historic NASA milestone, the 25th anniversary of the Hubble Space Telescope. The shuttle Discovery launched Hubble in 1990 and released it into an orbit 304 nautical miles above the Earth. Since then, it has traveled more than 3 billion miles in Earth orbits, made over 1 million observations, and sent us more than 500,000 images. Hubble has helped answer some of science's key questions and provided images that have awed and inspired the world. Today we'll learn about the past, present, and future of Hubble from NASA leaders. First to speak is James M. Free, Director of the NASA Glenn Research Center. Mr. Free, a native of Northeast Ohio, began his NASA career in 1990 at Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland, as a propulsion engineer and later as a systems engineer on several spacecraft. Currently, he serves as the director of the NASA Glenn Research Center, the 12th director in a distinguished line of leadership. He oversees more than 3,400 employees engaged in research, technology, and systems development programs in space propulsion, space power, space communications, aeronautical propulsion, microgravity sciences, and materials. Following Mr. Free will be NASA astronaut Michael T. Good. Also a native of Northeast Ohio, Mr. Good received a commission in the U.S. Air Force in 1984, became a test pilot, and logged more than 3,000 hours in more than 30 different aircraft before being accepted into NASA's astronaut program in the year 2000. He was a crew member on the STS-125 Atlantis space shuttle mission in 2009, which was the last NASA mission to service the Hubble telescope. The mission was accomplished in 12 days, 21 hours, 37 minutes, and 9 seconds, traveling more than 5 million miles in 197 Earth orbits. Mr. Good spent 15 hours and 58 minutes conducting 2 of the 5 total spacewalks on that mission. Thanks to the efforts of Mr. Good and that crew, the refurbished Hubble Space Telescope now has 4 new or rejuvenated scientific instruments, new batteries, new gyroscopes, new outer blankets, and a new computer. Ladies and gentlemen, members and friends of the City Club, it is my pleasure to start today's program with James M. Free, Director of the NASA Glenn Research Center.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, and thank you very much to the City Club for having us here today, and I say us for NASA because you already saw some of the stars that worked on Hubble. It is a great honor for me to be here, although it's a little intimidating to follow the president. We just got to sign the book that the president signed and open for an astronaut. I'm not sure that anyone's really going to listen to what I have to say. So it is a great honor to be here. And as we prepared for this speech, because it is a team effort, we tried to come up with what would be the best theme. And on February 3rd, our administrator made a statement in his state of the agency about Hubble. It's still doing amazing science today, and the last textbook that will have to be rewritten because of Hubble's discoveries hasn't even been drafted yet. And to me, that puts into the framework what Hubble has accomplished in just 25 years. And I say just 25 years because it truly has quite a life to go. When you consider the vastness of space that Hubble lives within, much of the data that's captured originated millions of years ago, and we're just seeing it now. So if there's an event happening today, we're not going to see that for some time. And we're really witnessing the history of the universe. And as General Bolton said, let's take a journey over that 25 years of Hubble. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk through technical difficulties. Ironic that NASA's here with technical difficulties. There we go. The reason for the telescope. Who thought of it? Why use a telescope in space? The origins of Hubble and its namesake. Sorry, I think my battery's dying here. There we go. And we'll talk through some of the discoveries, and we'll talk through them. You'll hear me, but what I really want you to look at is those pictures that are out there. The pictures you'll see today and the descriptions of what that means for us and our future in the universe and where we go from here. But what I'd first like to talk about is that role of the NASA Glenn Research Center and who we are in this town. NASA Glenn has two campuses. One that you see when you fly into the airport, the big hangar there, that's our Lewis Field campus, just a few miles from here. And then a little bit west is our Plumbrook campus. I think this is really struggling here today. All right, you got it, Matt. Both campuses, you heard, a little over 3,000 employees engaged in research that's cutting edge, that's flying today. That's the spectrum that we work in. Things that you see in your home today are impacted by NASA Glenn. Things that you'll see in the future are impacted. If you have satellite TV, that's the greatest thing I'll point to you today. If you listen to satellite radio on the way in here this morning. We also have our visitor center, which is located just probably less than a mile from here at the Great Lakes Science Center, exposing that next generation, some of whom you see in the room today, to the engineering discoveries, the scientific discoveries that will spur them on to hopefully one day be in the seat I'm in here today. But let's talk about who had the idea from Hubble. Of course, it's a great Ohioan, born in Toledo, Dr. Lyman Spitzer in 1914, just 101 years ago. With those ideas, we're speaking at breakfast today. Why do people in Ohio love aerospace so much? Here's another example of a person that did. During World War II, Dr. Spitzer worked on research in sonar. Later, he wrote a paper about the benefits. I'm going to have you click here, Matt. The benefits of putting a telescope in orbit. One more, please. He was the first person to propose that idea. And the major benefit of that, there we go, is that we get beyond the atmosphere of space. We have of Earth. So we have many telescopes here on Earth that see great things, right? You can go in a telescope in your backyard today and see tremendous things in the universe. But getting beyond the atmosphere takes away that blurring effect. And that's where Dr. Lyman's Spitzer's idea came from. He was the first one, he and astronomers like him were the first one to dream of those space telescopes. And on August 25th of 2003, NASA launched one of its newest telescopes, an infrared telescope, and it was named for Dr. Spitzer and his great ideas. But where does the Hubble Space Telescope come from? It comes from Dr. Edwin Hubble. Hubble was the Carl Sagan of his day. He was an American astronomer that played that crucial role in extragalactic astronomy. I mean, if you're going to put something on a business card, that's what you should put on a business card. His discoveries came about really around one fundamental idea, and that's the redshift information on galaxies, which was the formation of, really, and later validated by another NASA spacecraft, the Big Bang Theory. So the proposal is put a telescope in low Earth orbit, can do great things, but then the space race began, and it really took off with Sputnik. And just 1 year later, in 1958, is when NASA was founded. By the way, NASA's forebear, the NACA, is 100 years old in 2015. Those great discoveries that led then to the formation of NASA. And that space race really drove the race to low Earth orbit and to find a way to get these telescopes up there. And in 1962, sorry, Matt, I'm just going to say, you can click through one more on this. In 1962, the National Academy of Sciences said this should be a national space priority for the United States. Putting that telescope in orbit beating the Soviet Union to that feat. It took more than a decade for that telescope to really get started, and it began with a partnership with the Europeans. Much like we do today, many years later, 40 years later, one of our greatest partners, the European Space Agency, not just to share the scientific discovery, but the financial responsibility of putting such a large telescope in low Earth orbit. The justification for Hubble: measure the size and age of the universe, uncover the clues at how the universe was formed, and reveal the birth and death of stars to understand how our own star, the Sun, will behave. The Hubble Space Telescope was built and tested and ready for launch aboard the Space Shuttle in 1985. But then we hit a bump in the road, significant bump in the road in our space history, the Challenger disaster, where we lost the crew and really our ability to access space for 2 years. After that accident, when we finally got into space, the Space Shuttle program resumed, and the shuttle launched the Hubble Space Telescope on April 24th, 1990. And the pilot on that mission, as you can see from the mission patch, is our administrator today, General Charlie Bolden. So he has a great affinity for the Hubble. And this is a picture actually taken with the IMAX camera, which is a 70-millimeter camera flown on Space Shuttle and Space Station with great imagery. And you can see the shuttle arm below it. Shortly after it was launched, the strengths and flaws of Hubble were quickly seen. Here's two pictures. On the left is a ground-based observation of Pluto and one of its moons, Charon. On the right is the Hubble image of Pluto and that same moon. Now, even with the flaw, which the picture on the right, the flaw in the mirror in Hubble, you can see the clarity that Hubble gave us right out of the gate. That mirror was ground to the wrong shape. Not so good headlines of NASA were in the news, as you can see here. Sorry, go ahead, Matt. It was soon decided that there needed to be a servicing mission, and we saw that great video just a few moments ago of that servicing mission, where corrective optics were installed. If you think of it this way, glasses were put on Hubble, which is an incredible feat that we could do that with just putting one instrument in and helping the planetary cameras see that much clearer. And you can see two of the astronauts here, and we'll hear from one of our crew members from the 5th mission here in a moment. So this was the first of 5 missions. NASA Glenn played an important role in all of those missions, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. Here's another great image of before and after from the Wide Field Planetary Camera. Look at the clarity of those images. We'll talk about, I mentioned, listen to the words, but look at those images of what really is out there and what we have in this universe to look at and what Hubble brought us, both even corrected and not. Go ahead, Matt. So what is really that draws Hubble, and personally draws me to look at these images? It's that amazing things that are out there. It really creates this cult of, I want to see what that next image is. And in 1991, Hubble captured a very rare event on Saturn, a storm that encircled the entire planet. Now, Hubble won't see Saturn or any planet or any body like a satellite that orbits it, but we can turn Hubble anywhere in the universe and look. And that storm encircled the entire planet of Saturn, giving us these high-resolution images is what Hubble has enabled. Now, the nearest large galaxy to us is the Andromeda Galaxy. The ground-based images here really show the scope of the galaxy, but you can see on the right how the core really can be imaged from Hubble. So on the ground, we had no idea there was a double nucleus in that galaxy, but only with Hubble did we find that. So how do we process those images? I talked about General Bolden's statement about rewriting textbooks that have yet to be written. That's one of the images that we can see that in. Another great event that Hubble captured was in 1994 when the Shoemaker-Levy slammed in to Jupiter. The comet broke into several pieces. On the left is the visible image, where you can see the dark spots on the bottom where the comet hit Jupiter. On the right is the infrared image, where you can even make out more of the impact that it had on the planet. In 1995, Hubble took a look at the Orion Nebula, and here's a mosaic of observations showing the nebula and the birth of the star. You can see where the shock wave in the upper right can be viewed by Hubble. That's the matter piercing through that nebula. And even in the next image, you can see the birth of a star. Think about that, the birth of a star. This is another image of a star estimated to be about 100 times more massive than our own sun. They live very short lives. Here you can see this star disintegrating and dying in supernova explosions and the mass being ejected out the sides, just with one image from such an incredible space telescope. On the second servicing mission, which you can see here, the astronauts installed an infrared camera known as NICMOS. These improved the Hubble's ability to take spectra of cosmic objects, such as this. There we go. Go ahead, Matt, if you could get to the next one. Thank you. These are the antennae galaxy interacting with each other, long tidal tails stretching away from the core. Again, it just makes your mind wander at where we can get to. The next is a galaxy M101. Imagine that galaxy spinning thousands of light years away from us. Again, light years away. Hard to put your mind around that. Next is a view of our own Milky Way, the central region of our Milky Way. Milky Way has 200 to 400 billion stars. This is one piece that we can see of it. This next image, again, at the center, took 2 weeks to create, to capture all the light. So we have to point Hubble precisely and hold it there as the light hits the mirror and is captured by the images. Just incredible to think through. Next is the death of the constellation Taurus. So we talk about the birth of stars, the deaths of constellation. Our universe is constantly evolving. Here's another example of it here. This is the Crab Nebula. And, of course, I love when people write things for me. And what they wrote here I'm going to read, even though they don't want me to read it. In capital letters it says, "No additional commentary." Now, whether they don't want to hear me talk or just take a look at the picture. But to me, it's just take a look at the picture. Now, for those of you that had to live through my TED Talk, you get to live through it in another form here. What I need to do is find it first, and I put 3 of them in here. A dime. So if you take a dime and you look through the eye of President Roosevelt, if you think about it, looking through it this way, what you see here is a view of the sky that looks through that small of an area. And this is a compositive image taken over 3 years. And in that one area of the sky that previously, through ground-based observation, was black. We saw nothing. With Hubble, you see over 5,000 galaxies here. 5,000 galaxies in that one small image. As I've stated before, it's really mind-boggling for me to look at that and think what really is out there. What awaits with further observations of Hubble. As we understand how to process those images, that's where we go. This is called the Eagle Nebula and is fondly known as the Pillars of Creation. So you see the dust of stars being formed. future stars being out there in that dust as the universe evolves. Next is the supernova that astronomers viewed just on March 5th of this year. This image was released. You can see exploding stars, powerful gravity of the elliptical nature of it. Sorry, we jumped ahead one. This is an image of how the light gets to Hubble. It travels multiple paths. So the light starts on one side, travels through other solar bodies in the universe, and eventually makes its way to Hubble. Sorry, Matt, where are you at here? Yeah, you can go back to that. There you go. So if you think of it as the light's all leaving at the same time, but the path it travels takes different routes and gets routed and bended in different ways. So we're seeing the same light over time from the same source in different ways with Hubble. And then the astronomers here put it back together. Go to the next one, Matt, please. So then the latest discovery also is on Ganymede and the underground saltwater oceans, which are greater than what we have here on the Earth's surface. So you start thinking about what's in those oceans, and our science administrator, go ahead, Matt, John Grunsfeld, I think, really put it back best. Hubble's made many scientific discoveries in our own solar system, and a deep ocean under the icy crust of Ganymede opens up further exciting possibilities for life beyond Earth. So when you look at that and you think, well, there could be living beings, living things underneath that surface. It's incredible. So go ahead, Matt. So what has Hubble helped us reveal? The universe is 13.8 billion years old. The most distant stars are 13.2 billion light years away. And the images of stars we're getting now are only 600, 800 million years old. It's less than 4% of the current age. It's incredible. And then there's the Goldilocks zone, which is where do we look to find bodies that have the conditions where life can exist. They're the right distance from a star, just like Earth is. They have the right orbits where liquid water could exist, which is the foundation of life. And there's literally billions of planets in that type of zone. So you start thinking about what is out there, who is out there. So during this presentation, the beginning I talked about, and we met some of the folks who worked on the servicing mission. NASA Glenn played a significant role, and you can flip through these, Matt, please, if you could, with the atomic oxygen durability testing, solving some of the issues of the solar rays snapping when they went from hot to cold and cold to hot. The durability testing, thermal cycling testing. The NASA Glenn team conducted many of those just a few miles from here. You can flip through this, Matt. There you go. Some of the folks are in the room here today. Flip through these two charts. Bruce Banks, Joyce Dever, Kim DeGrow, Tom Stuber, Kurt Stidham. I'd like for a minute for those folks, once again, even though they did it, to stand up and acknowledge them for their role in 25 years of Hubble discoveries. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker, again, opening for the president and for an astronaut here. Is Mike Good. Mike's a native of Cleveland, as Stephanie said, and a tremendous astronaut and with a distinguished career in the United States Air Force. Mike?
Well, good morning. Thanks, Jim and Stephanie. Matt, if you could bring up my slides, please. I'll just do this voice-activated. Can you go back to the first one? Well, anyway, thank you for the kind introduction and the opportunity to join the the Cleveland City Club and the team from NASA Glenn Research Center to begin the celebration of Hubble's 25th anniversary. It's a pleasure to be back in Ohio. I'm lucky enough, next slide please. I'm lucky enough to be on a poster like this with a group of Ohio astronauts, including John Glenn and Neil Armstrong. And people often ask me, why are so many NASA astronauts? Why have they come from Ohio? I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but my buddy Mike Foreman, who's also on this poster, likes to joke that it has to do with that a lot of folks from Ohio are looking for work out of state. So. Next slide. Seriously, I was honored and humbled when NASA Glenn Center Director Jim Free asked me to join him at this event and share my experiences as a crew member on the final Hubble servicing mission, STS-125, back in May of 2009. It's hard to believe it's over 5 years ago now. Next slide. So it was a relatively short trip, 13 days, but we traveled over 5 million miles and 197 orbits around the Earth. So here's the STS-125 crew as we loaded up on the cool Astro van for our trip to the launch pad. Next slide. We continued our mission in this vehicle, the Space Shuttle Atlantis. This was my dream as I grew up here in Cleveland, to become an astronaut and to launch into space on the Space Shuttle and go explore our solar system and the universe. Next slide. So here I am in the White Room. It's at the 195-foot level, just outside the side hatch of the Space Shuttle. It's at this point that I realized there is no turning back. There's a couple of guys that are helping me get my harness on, but that guy with the number 1 on his back, his job was to guard the door and make sure I didn't head out, back down the gantry. I had to go through that side hatch, get strapped into the vehicle, get into my parachute and my seat on the flight deck. Next slide. As the countdown reaches 0 and the 2 solid rocket motors light, the 8 bolts that hold the shuttle down on the pad explode, and we're on our way. Even though we weigh 4.5 million pounds, we have 7.5 million pounds of thrust. So again, once all those engines light, we're definitely going somewhere. It's a pretty quick ride to orbit, only 8.5 minutes. The main engine's cut off and we go from 3 Gs getting pushed down in our seat to floating in space for the next 2 weeks. Next slide. So on flight day 3, we finally get to see Hubble for the first time. It's a beautiful sight and it looks pretty good after 19 years in space at this point. Next slide. As we get closer, Megan reaches out with a robotic arm to grab Hubble and bring it down into our payload bay, in the back of the payload bay, our garage, where we're going to work on it for the next 5 days. Next slide. For me, the highlights of both my missions were the spacewalks. This is what I had dreamed about, going outside in my spacesuit, floating over to the Hubble Space Telescope, grabbing onto the handrails, actually opening up the doors and actually climbing inside the Hubble Space Telescope to work on the various scientific instruments and equipment that Stephanie talked about. Next slide. The meat of our mission was 5 back-to-back spacewalks. And so we had 2 teams of 2 spacewalkers to service and repair Hubble. Some of the work was scheduled maintenance, kind of like changing the oil and rotating the tires. In this case, it was replacing the gyros and batteries. We hung some new thermal blankets out there. We also performed some upgrades. We installed a new camera and a new spectrograph to improve the telescope's discovery power, and we repaired 2 broken instruments. So now Hubble was at that time in the best shape of its life and at the very apex of its scientific capability. Next slide. After getting suited up in the airlock, the first thing I did was climb onto the robotic arm from the shuttle. This would be my workstation. You can see the tool handle that's in front of me with many of the tools that I would use out there on that spacewalk. And I could hook my feet into the boot plate and kind of hold on with my feet so that I could work with both of my hands, which is an advantage. My spacewalking partner, Mike Massimino, out there was the free floater, so he was always hanging on with one hand, but I had both hands to work with. Next slide. So then Megan flew me back on the arm to the telescope. Here I am using a power tool to loosen up the bolts on the fixed head star trackers so that we could open up those doors. So power tools in space, right? What a great job. Next slide. Here's a shot of Hubble with those doors open, and so it's exposing the bowels of the telescope. Next slide. Mass and I would literally crawl inside the telescope among the instruments and mirrors to make the repairs we had trained to perform. Inside the telescope, we could hear the voices of our trainers back on Earth reminding us, this is $1 billion telescope. You guys are going up there to fix the telescope. Right? Remember that, fix the telescope. Do not break the telescope, whatever you do. Don't mess this up. So no pressure. Next slide. All the spacewalks turned out to be real nail-biters. Both of my spacewalks on Hubble were planned for 6.5 hours, but they ended up going about 8 hours each. They were the 5th and 8th longest spacewalks ever. We were happy that they finally let us back inside. Here you can see John Grunsfeld opening the inner hatch back to the middeck. You can see the airlock in there. I don't know if you can look through that hole. You see boots and elbows and tools, but Massimino and I are inside there with our spacesuits and all the tools we had from our little jaunt outside. Next slide. So finally I could get out of my suit, come back inside. I was pretty tired, hungry, and thirsty, but most of all I was happy because we had successfully completed all of our tasks. Next slide. The first thing we did was rehydrate. All we had for that 8 hours outside was a quart of water. We have a little drink bag velcroed to our chest with a little straw coming up into our helmet. And that was all we had, and so that had been long gone. So the first thing was just put a drink bag in front of me and suck that water down. Next slide. After 5 straight days of spacewalks, the repairs were complete, and we released Hubble back into its orbit, 300 nautical miles, about 360 statute miles above the Earth. The first 9 days of the mission had been a real sprint to get there, to do the 5 spacewalks, but we had a few extra days at the end of the mission just to kind of relax, take a few pictures, and enjoy the view. The view from space is incredibly beautiful. Next slide. People often ask me, what was it like? And it's hard to describe, and these pictures aren't going to capture all the colors and amazing glory of God's creation. But this is what it was like. That was a sunrise from space, which is just an incredible experience. We're going around the Earth once every 90 minutes. So we get to see 16 sunrises and sunsets every day. This is a picture of the International Space Station over Lake Erie. So we didn't get this far north on our Hubble mission, so I had to borrow a picture from my second mission, which went to the International Space Station, so I could show you what you look like from space. The International Space Station is traveling, so this is west to east. You see Lake Erie there, kind of going vertical in the picture. So Cleveland, you're there on the southern coast of Lake Erie. I think some of you guys had your eyes closed. But next slide. So before I finish up, I'd like to share some of the incredible pictures that Hubble has sent down to us from all over the universe. This is why we went, to enable the science not only for the astronomers and astrophysicists, but also to inspire teachers and students and everyone to explore our universe. It's pretty satisfying to see the results through the release of new images of Hubble since our mission. See, so we didn't screw it up. This is proof that we didn't break the telescope. This image reveals a small region inside this massive star cluster called Omega Centauri, which boasts nearly 10 million stars. What's neat about this is that you can see the different colors of the stars. This is one of the advantages of getting up above the Earth's atmosphere. And the colors of the stars, everything is high-def 3D, right? And very crisp. Stars don't twinkle in space. And so you can see the colors, the blues, the yellow, white, reds, oranges. And this really gives you a hint as to where they are in the life cycle, what they're burning and what they're going through. So just kind of a neat shot there. One more, I think, Jim, you might have even shown this too. It's called the Extreme Deep Field. And again, Hubble's just looking through a tiny little part of the sky. If you went out and looked through a soda straw, this is in just that little tiny piece of the sky. And the difference from that last picture were all stars. And these are all galaxies with millions and billions of stars each. This is the first step of exploration. It's called the extreme deep field because it's looking back 13 billion years at some of the very first light of our universe. It hurts my head how far this light has traveled in 13 billion years, at the speed of light, and how big that makes our universe. This is why we trained. This is why we went. Next slide. So while I was in orbit, I celebrated the 25th anniversary of my commissioning in the Air Force. It was an honor to fly in space as an active duty Air Force officer, and it was an honor to join all of you here today. Godspeed to you as you journey through life and pursue your dreams. I salute you all. Thank you.
This morning at the City Club of Cleveland, we're enjoying a forum on the Hubble Space Telescope featuring James M. Free, director of the NASA John H. Glenn Research Center, and Michael T. Good, NASA astronaut. We encourage you to formulate your questions now and remind you that your questions should be brief and to the point and actually questions. Be sure to tune in to our Friday forums on 90.3 WCPN, WVIZ PBS, 104.9 WCLV Idea Stream, or one of the many radio stations across the region and country that carry City Club programs. Television broadcasts of the City Club are made possible by Cleveland State University and PNC. Join us this Friday, April 3rd, as we continue our RNC 2016 series with Mark Everson, former Internal Revenue Services Commissioner and Republican candidate for president. For more information about our upcoming and past forums, please visit us online at cityclub.org. We welcome guests at tables hosted by the Greater Cleveland Partnership, the NASA John H. Glenn Research Center, and the Ohio Aerospace Institute. We thank all of you for your support. We welcome students today from the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine and Shaw High School. Student participation in City Club forums is provided by the Loeb Foundation. Will the students please stand and be recognized? Now we'd like to return to our speakers for a traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from everyone, including guests. Holding our microphones today are Marketing and Outreach Specialist Kirsten Pianka and City Club intern Wesley Allen. First question, please.
A question for Mike Good. How accurate is the training that you go through to simulate the zero-G environment to what you actually experience out there when you're trying to do a repair job on a billion-dollar instrument?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we train actually in a swimming pool. We have a huge swimming pool at the Johnson Space Center. It's 40 feet deep. It has over 6 million gallons of water in it. And so down in that pool, we had the space shuttles, payload bay, we had the Hubble Space Telescope, not the real one, the mock-ups of these things, but they're very accurate. And we trained in the pool then in our spacesuits, and the divers that were down there with us, they would weigh us out so that we were neutrally buoyant in the water, so we would float in the water. And as you float in a swimming pool in the summer, and I know it's a little cold right now, but that is the closest feeling to what it's like to float in space. And it was an excellent way to train. It was, I felt like when I went out the hatch on my first spacewalk, everything looked familiar. I mean, other than I couldn't see the bottom of the pool floor, I didn't see the other divers and the bubbles, the view was a lot better. But as far as the payload bay, the telescope, everything was where I expected it, and it was very familiar, which was kind of a strange thing. But it was nice. But a great way to train in the pool.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Free, you touched on European assistance. Could you talk a little more about that?
Well, so the Hubble is a joint project with the Europeans. The Europeans fly instruments on Hubble and share in the data. And then across NASA, we have a number of programs with the Europeans. Actually, one we lead here at NASA Glenn for the Orion multipurpose crew vehicle. The Europeans are providing the service module for that. We have partnerships across our entire science mission directorate in aeronautics. as well. So the European Space Agency and other European partners have been with NASA quite a bit along the way.
Right. Regarding the, well, first of all, I wanted to say that it's interesting to hear material science playing such an important role, because often we hear a lot about the astronauts, but not much about the engineers behind it. Was Hubble expected to last 25 years? And in general, I'm impressed by the Mars rover and other vehicles who've lasted longer than their expected life.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, so I'm not sure that the folks really thought that Hubble would last 25 years, so it's kind of a nice surprise. But on the other hand, it was built to be serviced. You know, that it had the handrails on it. It was meant for people to go up and grab it with a robotic arm and bring it in and to be able to work on it, which allows us to go up there and to not only repair it if it's broken, but to take up new cameras. You know, it's like, just think about the technology. Think about your phone. You know, how every couple years the new phone comes out and it's so much better than the last one. So this allows us to take new instruments up to Hubble and new cameras that have just so much more capability than they did back in 1990. So it's really just, again, it's a new telescope every time we can go up and refurbish it. How long will it last from here? So it's been up there over 5 years since we worked on it. I think at that time we were hoping to get another 5 years out of it. You know, so the warranty on the parts was about 5 years. So there's no warranty on the labor, by the way. So, but we hope to get another 5 years out of Hubble at least. It's really in pretty good shape right now.
This question may be either for Director Free or Astronaut Good. I'm curious if you could go back 25 years and speak to the design team. What's the one thing you would tell them as they begin their work on Hubble?
I didn't fix it, so.
I guess I would tell them, good job. I mean, it's, as I said, it was designed to be serviced, and so you know, they knew a lot more than I know now. But I guess the one thing I would have asked them to do is on the doors. They were very hard to open and close. So actually, they were pretty easy to open. They just wanted to kind of pop open once we undid the 4 bolts. But they were hard to get buttoned back up and closed. And if you didn't do that, again, no more telescopes. So they were just very flexible and kind of like trying to put 2 potato chips back together again. So Mass and I had a tough time getting that buttoned up again, and as did a lot of the other astronauts on previous missions. But in general, I would have said, you guys nailed it. You guys did a great job.
And I think there's a lot of talk about the flaws in Hubble, and the mirror obviously being the greatest one. But when you think of how that mirror was ground and how I mentioned holding it in a stable position, you know, tenths of arc seconds for weeks at a time. That's incredible control design for, it was launched 25 years ago, finished building it in 85, so it's even more incredible than that. And I'd probably lose my NASA badge if I don't mention that the next space telescope's being built right now called the James Webb Space Telescope, which will go a million miles from Earth, so I mean, might be a one-way servicing if you want to go. But it's not designed to be serviced. And it's a 16 segmented mirror with a huge sunshade to keep the telescopes cool so we can see even further into the history of the universe. So Hubble's tremendous. It will go on. There's always talk about we're going to shut off Hubble. I think that's a long way off because we're not going to shut it off until we absolutely have to. But the James Webb will give us even more incredible pictures.
Do you believe that in our lifetime that we will witness life beyond our solar system or planet?
Not sure if I understood the question.
Is there will we witness life beyond our? You stood up first. So.
Yeah, I don't. Join me. Well, I think, I don't know if it'll be in my lifetime. I hope in my lifetime we get to go to Mars and explore that planet. But I think the Hubble telescope, again, as I talked about how big the universe is and what it's taught us, Hubble has taught us about these other planets that may exist around other stars out there and just how many there are. I think there's certainly a great chance that there is life out there somewhere. The question will just be if, can we find it? Can we, will we be able to communicate with them? And I think this is just one of the reasons we explore, and to continue to chase that, to find out, what else is out there, maybe where we came from. Jim talked about the birth of these stars. We're all made up of star material. I don't know, you guys are all stars out there, literally. We're all made up of stars that have exploded over time. So it's just, to me, it's just fascinating to continue to study and explore our universe and to answer these questions. That is the key question that we're really trying to answer with Hubble and other telescopes.
The only thing I'd add is I heard a great analogy of the age of the universe. And if you think of the universe as a year, our planets were formed about 6 p.m. on December 31st. And you think about how old Earth is, and it's relatively new when you think of the universe in that span. So that says there's a whole lot that's gone on before us. I mean, even on Mars, right? Just within the past few years, we confirmed there was liquid water on Mars. And they're the same age as us, right? So you have to think that there's been something out there before in some form. It might be microorganisms, and it just so happened that Earth was perfect and everything evolved from there. But I have to think at some point there was some type of life, even microorganisms, somewhere else.
My question was actually originally intended to help Jim Free keep his badge, but I'll ask it still anyway. As the James Webb Telescope's coming along, is there an actual NASA Glenn role in it at the moment, or do you foresee a role in it as it continues to be developed?
I think we've had some materials expertise certainly there, playing into that. We've tested parts of it and will test parts of the launch vehicle out at our Plumbrook station, the fairing. So there's been some role in the James Webb for us. And I didn't mention before, launch for that is 2018 right now. So Hubble's got to hold on.
Okay, as the Hubble telescope is trying to get evidence for the Big Bang Theory, is there any evidence what happened before the Big Bang Theory?
These questions keep getting harder and harder.
And you keep standing up first. So.
Yeah, we had an agreement that I would take the easy questions and you take the hard one. I think that's a question for the Creator himself. I don't know what was before the beginning. It's interesting that with Hubble, we're actually looking back, as I said, to the first light, of the universe. And before that, there was maybe just some microwave energy. But yeah, it's pretty hard to think about what was before the beginning, right? Or on the other end, what's beyond the edge of the universe? So if the universe is this big, what's beyond the edge of it? Which, again, I think it's just hard for us to understand with our human minds and the limits of our human language and just knowledge. I'll have to quote my grandson, who just, the analogy is, he just said to his mom, he says, "Mom, I don't remember you before you had kids." He's just 6 years old and in first grade, And I thought, wow, what do you say to that? But yeah, I just think some of it is just we're just limited by our human, capability and understanding. But maybe it's a question for the Creator himself.
What were the mission objectives and did it achieve them? And also, what are the objectives for the next generation of telescopes?
So I mentioned during my talk, it was really to learn about the birth of the universe and see that first light, as Mike put it, and to understand better those bodies that are closer to us and things about their environment and things that happen to them, like the comet impact. Has it met them? I would say yes, and then some. Just by, first of all, number one, it's designed to be serviced. So not only has it helped us see these things in the universe, it's helped us learn how to work in space, with some of the labor that we found along the way to help us work in space. It helped us learn how to design things to be serviced, which is incredibly important when you think we're going to send vehicles to Mars and it might take us 6 months to get there. Well, we're going to have to learn to work on them because chances are things are going to need to be worked on. So it's helped us both in its discoveries and in our human exploration side of space as well. James Webb is to look even deeper into the universe, to see things. Part of the issue with Hubble is you can't cool things down for as long as you'd like or as much as you'd like. So for James Webb, it's the sunshade for James Webb is about the size of this room we're in today. And it's all got to be folded up at launch with the mirrors and then deployed. So the sunshade, I think if I have this wrong, someone from NASA can correct me, I think it's 5 or 6 layers thick. So the layers are maybe about 1/8 of an inch, but they're stacked up so they can put the back of the James Webb to the sun and cool down. So it's looking at deep space, cool down to a couple Kelvin and look at space and see even more light. So we talk about looking at one space for a short amount of time and getting all that light in. You can see more being at a colder temperature. So James Webb is going to get even more clarity in pictures we're seeing now and see much more than we can even see.
Yeah. And if I just quickly add to that, the other thing that's different about James Webb is just the spectrum that it's looking in. It's more in a little bit longer wavelength, the infrared spectrum, versus Hubble, which looks mainly in the visible spectrum, which is why you see the pictures that we see. It's a little bit on the infrared side and a little bit on the ultraviolet side on the fringes of it, but James Webb is going to be more in that infrared spectrum, which is, again, with a cooler background, and just looking at that, using that wavelength, it's able to just see more. I mean, with a telescope, you're just trying to focus light on your mirror and gather that light from, billions of years ago. So I think one of the great discoveries from Hubble, and one of the things that has literally rewritten the science, the physics books that Jim and I used when we were in high school, is that we've learned that the universe is expanding, right? And we knew that, but we sort of thought back in our day that the universe was, the Big Bang happened and it was expanding, but it would slow down and eventually stop and then come back and collapse on itself. But what we've learned in the last 20 years is that the universe is not only expanding, but it's accelerating. Everything in the universe is accelerating away from everything else. So it's not only moving and expanding, but it's getting faster and faster, which means that there's some force out there, right? And that's one of the discoveries of Hubble is this phenomenon, and that we call it dark energy. 75% of the universe is made up of this dark energy, which we really don't even know what it is, but we now know that it's out there. That it's. So this is just again just an incredible thing to try to wrap your head around, but literally again rewriting the textbooks in the last 20 years.
Good morning, Mr. Free and Mr. Good. I'm Anthony Price, a junior at Shaw High School. Along with that, I'm a Youth Forum Council member here at the City Club. As we're celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Hubble Space Telescope, and you guys talked about future projects, what should Cleveland and the world look out for as far as next year, 2016, or 2018? In the years to come, what are future projects Cleveland and the world should look out for?
Well, let's see. get a shameless plug in here. 2016 is the 75th anniversary of NASA Glenn. And I put it recently that from a NASA Glenn perspective, we're working on the next type of propulsion that's going to be used both in aircraft and spacecraft. So in aircraft, we're moving towards even more fuel-efficient aircraft engines and electric propulsion for aircraft. So eventually, you'll see a plane going over, you won't hear it because it'll be flying all electric. In space, we're working on solar electric propulsion to take us onto Mars. Mike talked about going to explore Mars. We can send all the cargo to Mars much more efficiently with solar electric propulsion and wait for the crew to get there. So in the coming years, you're going to see missions launched with high-power solar electric propulsion. From a NASA perspective, you're going to see the first crewed flight of the Orion vehicle in probably 2020, 2021. The next uncrewed launch is going to be in 2017, so we're going to be going on to deep space. Right now, actually just on Friday, we launched Captain Scott Kelly for a one-year mission on Space Station where we're going to understand how the human body reacts for a year in space. I think you're going to see further advancements on the science side. Mars Curiosity right now driving up the mountain on Mars, seeing those deltas where water once flowed on Mars. We're going to understand better how it flowed and the geologic features of our nearest partner. I think there's a lot of exciting things to come. Good.
Yeah. Anthony, thanks for your question and thanks for coming this morning. Just add that, by the way, when we go to Mars, it's not going to be me, right? It's going to be you guys. You guys are going to be the explorers going to Mars in the next decades. I'm too old. But I think what you will see from NASA in the next couple years, I think something that I'm working on right now is called the Commercial Crew Program. So right now, the space shuttle hasn't flown since 2011. When we fly up to the International Space Station with our astronauts, we go over to Russia and launch on a Russian Soyuz rocket. So we are working in the Commercial Crew Program to get that U.S. transportation capability for our astronauts to be able to take them up to the International Space Station. So you'll see in the next couple of years an uncrewed test flight mission and a crewed test flight mission probably in the 2016 to 2017 timeframe, so that we'll be ready to start that servicing of our U.S. and international partner astronauts from U.S. soil again in the 2017 to 2018 timeframe. So look for that in the next couple of years. And again, that'll be your ride to get up to the International Space Station when you guys are ready. So continue to study hard and dream big.
Today at the City Club, we have been enjoying a forum on the Hubble Space Telescope featuring James M. Free, director of the NASA John H. Glenn Research Center, and Michael T. Good, NASA astronaut. Thank you, Mr. Free and Mr. Good. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This forum is now adjourned.